Hello and welcome to class. It's week 4 and we're moving into close to the halfway point of the class. Now you should have gotten your papers back by now, and that'll give you a little more feedback about how you're doing in the class and how you're progressing in your understanding of the literature, as well as a way to summarize it and synthesize it in your discussions and writings. So this week we're going to be moving into a new era of theories. This will be called the systems management theories. And I always find the easiest way to kind of start talking about this is to lay out a little picture. And the idea behind systems theory is that all systems have a input, something coming into them, a process which processes it, and then an output that leaves the system and moves on to another system. Now, you might think, well, how does this have anything to do with management? Well, if you start thinking about it, the interest in coming up with a general systems theory that could be applied to almost anything can start with your own biological systems, your nervous system and your digestive system. We also have information systems, and we have the solar system, and we have different types of systems, biological systems, ecological systems at all levels. So it turned out to be a fairly useful way to explore many different aspects of both animate and inanimate life in our universe. And consequently, people thought they had finally stumbled upon a unifying principle that could be applied to everything around us. Okay? We won't be looking at quite the same level. However, systems theory goes back quite a while. Here are some of the major contributors. You'll notice this is broken into several sections. So we have systems theory in the area of humanities. Systems theory is applied to natural sciences, engineering, and so on. What we're going to be looking at is the social sciences, and there you'll see some of the authors, researchers that have shown up and are mentioned in your reading for this week. For example, Miller, is mentioned as actually credited with being kind of the originator, the person who saw that systems theory could be applied to management systems and organizations. You'll hear about Boulding. Herb Simon is another person that contributed to this field. So this kind of gives you a smattering of research that's been done in the area of systems in different fields of study. Now, generally, systems theory originated prior to the advent of computers, but when computers in the 1950s began to make inroads and computer programming began to be developed, obviously systems then kind of took on a whole new meaning, and we could see many aspects of not only information processing but artificial intelligence and other things now being described as systems. So let's get into what we're going to be doing this week. You have a discussion which is going to be basically reviewing and analyzing and synthesizing the readings from this week. And what I'd like you to do, now that you've got a little bit of background from the other theories, from classical theories and human relations theories, some of this stuff is going to start familiar and you say, hey, I know what they're talking about. Well, that's the whole idea. We know systems, we know theories. Going a little too fast for myself here. We know theories evolve from previous theories, and thus, as we would expect, systems theories are not totally isolated from every sort of management theory that came before. And so what I'd like you to do is to try to identify in which ways system theories are similar to what we've looked at before, or are different, what was added by systems theories, what advanced aspects of earlier theories, you know what I mean. Another part of the assignment for this week is a paper. This is going to be another 5 to 7 page paper. We want at least 5 additional. In addition, this means in addition to the assigned readings, at least 5 more peer-reviewed articles. But most of you are doing a very good job on that, and you have no shortage of material to put into your papers. So that I'm not too worried about. The paper is going to be, I'm going to hold you to it this time, 5 to 7 pages, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. The last assignment was 5 to 7, and I ended up in some cases getting substantially more. So we're going to try to learn how to limit our writing to the amount of space that you've got available. And the assignment, the content for the assignment is now, as you might expect, looking at the human relations theories from week 3 and the systems theories from week 4, and to explain and evaluate how they contributed to the evolution of management and leadership literature and practice, similar to what you did in the first writing assignment where you were fitting classical theories into the evolution. Now you're going to be fitting human relations and systems theories into the evolution. So pay attention to the requirements. Okay, as I said, I'm looking for a 5 to 7 page paper. I know you may have a lot more to say. In fact, a whole book could probably be written about this subject, but for the assignment, I want you to pick out the most important parts, and those are what you're going to put in your paper. After all, we're really focusing here on quality and not necessarily quantity. I know there's a tendency to, if you know more, that you think, well, I should put it in there because I know more than I've got in there. But what you need to learn to do, again, it's like you're writing for a newspaper and your editor tells you, you've got 3 inches of space and you're going to write the story in that. You might say, I've got a whole page full of material. I said, well, you got 3 inches to write it in, so figure out how to condense it down and put in the most important parts. So use this as a fixed requirement. As you know, we're going to be basing your writing on peer-reviewed journal articles, the assigned readings, and the additional related topics that you find. This is based upon some of what I saw in the first round of papers. Assume that you're writing for a non-professional audience, not somebody who's well-versed in the field and knows exactly what all the terms mean. Sometimes you get caught on this because you think, well, we've been talking about this, we've been talking about Taylor and scientific management for weeks now, so I can just use the terms and everybody will know what I mean. You can't do that. Really, if it's a non-conversational, non-common knowledge sort of term, it needs to have an explanation of what it is. Try to write in a direct, straightforward fashion. Some people attempt to write in what I would say would be a overly academic fashion or overly complex fashion, thinking, well, that shows how important this information is. I find that the people who can write in a more understandable fashion are really able to express themselves much better. You'll have chances to write in a complicated fashion, but right now I would prefer to read things in a simple fashion. Of course, follow the APA formatting and referencing requirements. So, just to give you kind of an idea about how you might approach this paper, and again, this is for those of you who kind of got dinged on the last paper that it was hard for me to follow exactly what you were doing, and I wrote on your comments, try to use an outline, try to break your paper up into different segments. Just don't start writing and write 7 or 8 pages with no breaks. Sort of like it has to have some sort of a structure, a skeleton to hang the meat on. So every paper is going to have a title page. Everybody did that. Every paper needs to have an introduction, and some people did this and some people didn't do this. I tried to interpret the first couple of paragraphs as introduction, but in general it didn't satisfy the basic requirements of introduction needs to do, which it needs to lay out in a very straightforward fashion. What's the topic of the paper? Okay, what is it that you're planning on writing about? This has to be kind of a general topic. You just don't start writing and then assume that the reader will be able to figure out based upon your writing what the topic's supposed to be. Lay it out. If you think the best way to do that is to simply restate the assignment, then do that. That tells me exactly what you think the topic is. Why is the topic important? Okay. And finally, and a lot of people don't really do this, is how will the paper that you're going to be writing address the topic? How is it going to be laid out? Sometimes this is done in an abstract, but since we're not generally using abstracts for shorter papers, your introduction really has to form the purpose of letting the reader know what you're going to do, and then allow the reader to interpret whether they want to keep reading it or not. Okay, so that's part of what your introduction needs to do. Beyond that, sure, you can make it interesting, you can add some sizzle to it and make it seem like it's really the best thing since sliced bread. Nothing wrong with that, but it better include these 3 items because me, as the reader and reviewer of your paper, needs to see these. Then you might start out with your first part. And again, this is just a sample, one way you might go. And the first part would be about the definition. What does the evolution of management mean? And you might say, well, this is what we've been talking about. Everybody knows what it means. Not the general reader. I should be able to take this paper and give it to somebody who has never taken this class, and they should be able to understand what you're talking about. So you probably want to write a section on defining the term. What does evolution in management mean? What elements of the human relations theories are going to be important to the evolution? So here you're tying the human relations theories to the evolution part. And the evolution part is a section of what the topic is. So everything has to hold together. Each part needs to tie to the other parts. And it has to be justified within answering what you said the topic of the paper is. Part 3 then might be the elements of the systems theories that are important. So here you're covering the second set of theories, and you're looking at the elements that are important to the evolution. Part 4, then how are these elements manifested in today's management practice and research? And here you look at the current practices and compare it to what evolved from those earlier theories to try to justify which parts evolve forward. As I said, you could think of this as sort of like evolution of the species or something, where certain parts of earlier species were adapted and moved forward in the evolutionary cycle, whereas other things were left behind because they didn't seem to fit the new environment. So that's what you're kind of doing. You're looking for those things that worked forward into modern day practices. Now again, this is just a sample. I'm not saying these are the things you have to put in yours. You should write it your own way. But I am making a point that when I look at a paper, I like to see it broken down into clear sections with headings that identify what is this part of your paper doing, what's the main point of this part, second, what's the main, and then how does this part tie into the overall topic. Okay, so I'm looking for more structure for those of you who just write one long, not a single paragraph, but one long kind of stream of verbiage without any breaks, without any transitions. It's sort of like, it's very difficult for me to try to pick out what the points are that you're trying to make, and that's obviously very important. Then you have your conclusion, where you tend to wrap things up, and then your reference list. So these may not be the sections of the paper that you want to do. This may not be the way you want to write the paper. You may have a different approach, but you should have a structure that can be laid out to identify what are the different parts of the paper and how the different parts relate to the topic. So the keys to success for week number 4. Of course, you want to look at your last paper and the comments that I've made on that. You want to try to repeat the good things and avoid redoing the bad things. You want to review the Scholarly Writing Part 2 video, which is a longer version of what I just went through when you set up an outline and trying to build your paper around a series of arguments to convince the reader that yes, you are explaining something about this particular subject. Start working early. Many papers needed another round of proofreading to clean them up before turning them in. So that all takes time. It should help you to, again, stick within the 5 to 7 page outline. That means just everything is shorter and there's less proofreading to do, less corrections to make. So start working early, set up your plan when you're going to do which parts. And then, as you know, you're going to be using lots of sources. Both these areas of management research have lots of different people that contributed to it, not only the original authors, but also the people that have been reviewing what those people did. Okay, so you're going to be looking to use more than the required references. So, until next time, I wish you good luck, and if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me.